Okay, so hello and welcome to this Reading UK's Economic Recovery webinar. My name is Nigel Horton-Baker and I'm the Executive Director of Reading UK. It's a private and public sector partnership that provides the economic development and place marketing services for the town. We've recently produced a new economic recovery and renewal strategy to deal with the impacts that the COVID-19 economic recession is having on our town. We call it the Powered by People economic strategy. This webinar has been produced to help describe the strategy in bite-sized chunks and see it through the eyes of our expert partners who will be on the call today. It's part of a suite of webinars, each describing different aspects of the strategy, and further details of this can be found at the end of the webinar. The webinar will look at this section of the strategy called Smart Reading, which aims to put science and technology at the heart of our economic recovery, but in a way that is environmentally sustainable and compatible with our objectives of reducing our carbon footprint. I'll now hand over to Scott Witchells. He's a director with Stantec, a global company based in Reading that tackles many of the environmental transport infrastructure challenges facing our world and our cities. Scott is also a board member of Reading UK. So over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Nigel. So you've heard we're going to cover the topic of how we can use and enhance and embrace technology to help support economic recovery, particularly in a smart and inclusive way. And we're joined by a panel this morning that's going to help shed some light on what we're doing and some of the ideas around that. You've heard from Nigel, the Executive Director of Reading UK. We'll also be joined by Ben Burfoot, who's the Sustainability Manager at Reading Borough Council, Dr. Susan Matos, who's the Knowledge Transfer Centre Director at the University of Reading, Richard Parker, who's the Founder and Chief Exec of Altitude Angel, and Tracy Rawling Church, who's the co-chair of the Reading Climate Change Partnership. So just going back to you first, Nigel, with our first question. We at Reading UK have spent the last few months working in the board and with the Borough Council and our wider partners to respond to the COVID-19 economic recession. Describe what the overall approach of Reading UK is and what we're proposing to do to support economic recovery and in the context of the strategy for the whole town.
Okay, Scott. Yeah, thank you. So we started on the development of this strategy with the board some 4 or 5 months ago. And we were very aware that up until COVID, we'd had a very successful economy. We were the fastest growing economy in the UK, according to Ernst & Young. And also that Reading had bounced back very quickly from the previous financial crash and recession some 10 years ago. But we didn't really think it was necessarily going to be the same this time. The COVID virus was a defining factor. And we think that it will probably get worse before it gets better at this point in time. Certain new economic and business practices may be irreversible. So we won't necessarily go back to the old normal. There could be a new normal that we'll have to plan for and deal with, such as home working, which is proliferated, and of course online meetings like the one we're having today. So it may be a while before we're free of the virus and the economy can really take off again. We also questioned at the board if we wanted to go back to the same as before, given the choice. Our feeling was yes, we wanted to return to economic success, but we concluded that we wanted to tackle our previous challenges, such as the high levels of inequality in the town and the reduction of the carbon footprint. So we wanted to move towards a more inclusive and much smarter and more sustainable economic future, with all businesses playing their part. The board has committed itself to the Reading 2050 vision again, and believing that it's relevant now more so than ever, and it could be accelerated through the delivery of this new strategy. We've also put a lot of priority on regenerating the town centre and the business improvement district that Reading UK manages. It's been under a lot of pressure with lockdown and reopening, and we've been investing a lot of time already in supporting people coming back into the town. But there's a lot of work to be done to support the regeneration of the town and sectors in it like retail, hospitality, tourism, leisure and the arts, which have been particularly badly affected. So the board, in a nutshell, really wanted a strategy that will grow back a more inclusive, smarter and more sustainable economy, and Reading that will be seen as a great place to live, work and do business, visit and enjoy. We've nicknamed it the strategy, Powered by People strategy, simply because we feel that Reading, the people of Reading, have been the target of coronavirus and been affected in many horrible ways. But equally, the people of Reading, we think, are part of the solution, whether they're employees, employers, entrepreneurs, by making the right business decisions, changing working practices, committing to upskilling, reskilling. Reading's recovery and future prosperity, we think, are in the hands of the people of Reading. So finally, as this webinar is going out at the Reading Climate Change Festival, can I say how pleased I am that we're launching our strategy at the same time as the new climate change strategy. I'll be working very closely with Tracy Loring Church, that's on the call today, and with Tim Dixon at the university, who are the co-chairs of the Climate Change Partnership, to ensure that the two strategies go hand in hand to meet our mutual objectives. Thank you. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Nigel, and some useful insights there, and some very interesting approaches we're taking, and particularly that powered by people point that you made, where we're very keen to engage everybody in Reading to help achieve the success. And also you mentioned the university and the links with them. So now coming on to Susan, Reading University has a fantastic global research reputation and is obviously committed to Reading as a place. So we're very keen to understand through Reading UK and some of the leading edge research you're doing, understand how science and technology is being researched to try to create some of those improvements that Nigel described in a post-COVID world. And in parallel, what the university is doing, really working with us to help Reading recover in both an academic sense and its work with business. So if you could explain some of those points, Susan.
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us. What I would say is we're talking today about sustainability and inclusive growth, and that's really at the heart of what the university is doing. We are a university with a global reputation for our research, particularly if you think about areas such as climate change, where we're world leading. But what we're really focusing on is how do we take that reputation and that expertise and bring it back to bring that benefit locally. So we've already touched on Reading 2050, and the university is an important partner in that, along with the Reading Climate Change Partnership and the Climate Action Network. So we're working at how do we use our world-leading position and knowledge to work with local partners so we can really bring that benefit back. And I think Reading 2050 is a really good example, whereby we're not just looking at creating the Reading of the future, so in 30 years' time, and that sustainable future, but actually one that's going to be inclusive for everybody. And that really chimes with research that we do both around technology, but also around working in inclusive societies. So the university has a really good long-standing work around working with communities, not on communities, so we can involve them in these kind of projects and work together to find those inclusive solutions. If we're thinking about some of the more leading edge technologies that we're working in, I think some really good examples that chime with the message that we're talking about around sustainability linked to our work around power and electricity. So for example, we know we're moving into a world where we're looking at more renewable energy, and we're looking at models of how do we actually use that energy so we are not adding challenges to the electric grid, we're actually supporting it. So as more electric vehicles come online, how might we model that and use that with smart charging, so that rather than being a drain on the system, actually we can use it as a storage system for peak demands. So that's some really exciting work that we're doing there. If I think more generally around the work that we're doing as a university to support the recovery, we're doing a lot of work with Thames Valley Science Park, our science park up at the M4 junction. And we're really focusing on the clusters that we can create around our expertise, but also the strengths of the region. And that really chimes with the university's aims around sustainability. So we're aiming to be the greenest university in the UK, but also to be carbon neutral by 2030. But that's all underpinned again by this inclusive growth agenda. So actually, how do we create those clusters that support not just those who are already doing well, but help bring up everybody and everybody can benefit? And I think a really good example there, people may have heard our announcement earlier this year was how we're bringing Hollywood to the Thames Valley Science Park. And what we're trying to create there is a creative tech cluster, and that will bring together media, it will bring together digital, but we're also now moving into TV studios to create that ecosystem around innovation. But an important part of that is upskilling and reskilling the workforce, because we're bringing all this digital technology in. How do we help people gain those skills so that everybody can access the jobs that we're going to be creating by bringing these fantastic clusters into the region?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. There's a lot of really interesting and almost too much in there to talk about. It's fascinating that, you know, you're upholding your reputation as a global leader in this field. And I think what we have found is that anywhere that's trying to achieve the things Reading 2050 sets out, particularly the green tech theme, you need a world-leading university front and centre as part of that strategy. So it's really good to see that all those things are happening, and working with businesses and promoting emerging technologies and enabling them and helping support. On that theme, now I'd just like to turn to Richard, who has set up a company in Reading, which is another example of emerging technologies application and communications, with the theme of sustainability and carbon reduction, but also something quite exciting. So could you just tell us a bit about your business, Richard, and what your plans are for growth and what you want to achieve in Reading?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So, you know, ultimately at Altitude Angel, our goal is to build the next generation of navigation systems that will be used to create the superhighways in our skies for commercial drones and aircraft. And a lot of people tend to think this is quite far away, but actually transforming the current aviation network is a very much a here and now activity that will support this future transport system. Now, predominantly for us, that means that we are effectively delivering sort of cutting edge digital services and software. We work with air traffic control organizations all around the world, but it's also blended with very real life trials, such as the 8-kilometre drone corridor that we're establishing in Berkshire, which actually runs between West Berkshire and Reading Borough Council districts. Now, in terms of our size, you know, we're about 5 years old. We employ about 27 people today, all from the Berkshire area. And throughout the course of 2021, we've got some great investors on board. We'll be roughly doubling the size of the company. So, you know, that's very significant growth, particularly during what is ultimately quite a challenging time.
Thanks, Richard. And what do we expect to see in terms of these trials? Will we start to see some of these vehicles and technologies in the air over our heads?
Absolutely. So, you know, one of the goals for Altitude Angel is to establish a framework and all the infrastructure required to support effectively any industry and any corporation from any particular vertical being able to fly the type of drone that's important for them. So that's everything from potentially a tiny sort of quad rotor drone. We would have seen those in the news, all the way up to bigger aircraft that perhaps don't always make it to the news, but are being built by the likes of folks like Airbus that will carry, you know, between 1 and 8 passengers around. So you will see all of these types of aircraft being tested and trialed in Berkshire over the next few years, starting as early as January next year.
And do you see these are really important trials to understand the technology, make sure it works, make sure it's safe, make sure the different vehicle types, as you describe, are capable of doing what they're doing? Do you see a future where these play a key part of our city landscape?
Absolutely. So, you know, the very future of urban transport is going to incorporate aerial mobility. And actually in our industry, the buzzword we tend to use is urban aerial mobility. And it's really a nice term for, you know, smaller aircraft that effectively are very, very quiet, probably electrically propelled. They carry, you know, a handful of passengers, which is very different, of course, to how we normally travel by air. And, you know, these have the benefit of helping to reduce carbon emissions on the ground by effectively getting more cars, you know, combustion engines off the road, but they have the benefit of effectively operating in a congestion-free environment. And then unlike air transport today, they allow you to go effectively direct from your point of departure to your destination. So that's really the future that drone technology offers, that in order to get there, we have to create systems which enable us to navigate safely over the people and the property on the ground. And that also means working with town and councils in planning departments to understand where and how we want to establish controls and how we want to allow this type of transport to emerge.
Thanks, Richard. That's a really interesting insight, and I think we'll all look forward to seeing some of those applications. I've certainly heard that an early adoption by emergency services, where they're trying to really struggle to get across congested towns, is something that most authorities are very keen on. So that's particularly of interest to us. Now I want to move on to Ben, who obviously represents the Borough Council here, and Reading Borough is a key partner in Reading UK and has endorsed the economic recovery strategy that Nigel has described. So a couple of points for Ben, if you would please, just to cover. And what we'd like to understand is what Reading Borough is doing as a business to champion this use of technology, and particularly in the context of reducing its carbon footprint. And indeed, how are you doing and what are your targets in that area? And then also a bit of understanding about how you're working with government, and particularly the Thames Valley Berkshire LEP, and some of the project opportunities that are emerging from what government is doing and what the LEP is doing to deliver some of this sustainable economic growth.
Well, thank you for that. Basically, the whole mission of reducing our carbon emissions is absolutely dependent on technology. So we absolutely need to have a strategy around, for example, electrification. So we're moving our vehicles and our heat towards electric sources. That allows us to tap into those national renewable energy resources that we've got available, but also more particularly our local renewable energy opportunities. So if we're putting renewable energy in locally, we want to be using that power locally for our vehicles and our buildings. And so there's a lot of that thinking going on in the council's estate at the moment about how to introduce electric vehicles to our operations, how to get our buildings heated through heat pumps and storage of electricity as well. It's a big part of the smart city solution that we need. There's so much opportunity and such a big part for businesses to play, especially with our local, highly developed tech industry can really play into this space. So I think it's a big opportunity for everyone here. Some of the big opportunities are that we can look towards those really exciting projects to do with transport and to do with the way we power our buildings. So the key opportunities I'm seeing are ones that are essentially getting backed by the government in their funding programs currently as well, through the Green Homes grant. So the council just won some money to retrofit some housing. We're looking to spin that out into private housing as well as our own housing, so that we can really build the local market in retrofit of houses, both looking at straightforward insulation, external and internal, but also down to the kind of heating mechanism that we use, and the way that we get much more efficient buildings. On the transport side, the council is looking at new refuse freighter vehicles, so those would be electric, and the exciting technological opportunity there might be that we can use those vehicles to actually start to power our buildings at times when there's high carbon intensity on the grid. So we can avoid using that high carbon electricity from the grid by using our own green electricity that's been coming back from our own vehicles. So that's the sort of opportunities that we can see coming forward. And those are the projects that we're working on at the moment. Yeah, so we also see the opportunities to work with Reading UK to make sure that we can get local businesses involved in these projects. So we've already been working in previous projects with businesses directly, and we're hoping got a new project we're looking to get funding for called Reading Zero Carbon Accelerator, where we're working with Reading UK and local businesses to try to, or will be hopefully, to get local businesses into the procurement process We at the council are also looking to develop our social value procurement process, using the different new measures to try to ensure that we can get really good low carbon technologies and solutions in, and that those create local jobs and build the green economy. So yes, working very closely both with the LEP and with Reading UK to try to achieve those things.
So thanks, Ben. Some really interesting projects that you've already got underway, and some targets and plans for the future that I'm sure we'll look forward to working with you on as part of Reading UK and the others involved in this discussion. So I'd like to now move on to Tracy. And I guess this all links back to climate change. We're talking about a technology-enabled future, that using that technology to make Reading a better place. And part of that is substantially reducing its climate impacts. And this is something Tracy is an expert in, being part of the climate change strategy. So what do you see really, Tracy, as the linkages between what you're doing in the economic recovery strategy and how those two dovetail and work together? Because some will say, well, you know, economic growth is the enemy of the environment and climate change. So how do you join those two together?
Thanks for the introduction, Scott, and also thanks to Nigel for the invitation. So as someone who's been working in sustainability for a long time, I'm really encouraged to see the explicit commitment to smart and sustainable growth in Reading's economic recovery strategy. At the Reading Climate Change Partnership, we've been working to reduce the carbon emissions of the town as a whole for more than a decade. And we've noticed a significant increase in the level of engagement that we're seeing now from businesses and community groups, particularly over the last 18 months. So we're a multi-stakeholder partnership. We're all volunteers drawn from community groups, businesses, the council, Ben Burfoot represents them, and also the university, where, as Nigel mentioned, Tim Dixon is my co-chair. So our new climate change strategy and action plan aims to move us towards the target of net zero carbon, climate change resilient town by 2030. And the focus on decarbonisation is a key component of the green growth agenda. And our strategy approaches this through 6 key themes. So on energy and low carbon development, we have an emphasis on retrofitting existing housing, which will improve energy efficiency, but it'll also create new jobs and also reduce energy bills to households. We also plan to build new renewables capacity, which will create additional employment opportunities and also help to develop the skills base for green growth. There's also an element of democratising energy supply, with 2 community energy companies already operating in Reading, to bring forward renewable energy projects that will keep the profits within the local economy. So we've heard a bit about innovative transport already from Richard. Our emphasis is on encouraging low carbon forms of travel, which will both reduce congestion and improve air quality. And both of those improvements will make Reading a more appealing place to live and work. And while COVID-19 has been devastating to lives and livelihoods, it's also taught us that in some sectors, work's a thing you do, not a place you go to. And that prompts a whole new conversation about the role of the workplace in urban centres. We've also got a plan to use resources more efficiently and to look for opportunities to avoid waste by repurposing materials discarded by one process as a raw material for others in what's become known as a circular economy. So Reading's already got a vibrant circular economy club that's exploring opportunities to create new business models with a focus on efficient use of resources. And we have the innovation hubs that can incubate them. Another thing COVID taught us was the value of green and blue spaces for leisure and well-being, and especially the importance of ensuring that everybody has equal access to them. So preserving the national environment is another key theme of our strategy. And there are strong links between protecting biodiversity and enabling the carbon storage through green space to make the town more resilient to the possibility of flooding or drought. And then last but certainly not least, there's health. And many of the measures in the climate emergency strategy will have important health benefits, for example, cleaner air, more active travel, and less fuel poverty. But we believe that many of the measures will also improve mental well-being by addressing sources of stress and anxiety, and tapping into the restorative power of nature. So we believe that by taking concerted action on climate change, we'll all be healthier, fitter and happier, and that our communities will be more financially secure and resilient to future shocks. So rather than being the enemy of the environmental movement, we actually see economic development as a key partner in achieving this better future for everyone.
Thanks, Tracy, and some really strong and interesting points there, particularly around the importance of community and community being part of what you're doing, you know, effectively front and centre. It's about them, it's their climate, it's their environment. And then the link with the economy, as you say, is very important. Some work I know we're doing with the university around social value is about making sure that when we make decisions about investments, it takes the whole picture into account, not just the cost and the economic return. It's all those factors you just described. So it's fascinating and great to see that the climate change strategy is embedding all of those principles into that and can link very well with the economic growth agenda. So thank you for that, Tracy. That's really helpful and insightful.
Scott, perhaps I could come back in, Scott, and give you a chance to express some views and ideas. You've been a great proponent of the smart city concept, and indeed last year at the Reading Economic Forum, were quoted as saying that you felt Reading was already a smart city and making great strides in that respect. It's something that certainly links it to the Reading 2050 vision and our immediate priorities to recover and renew the economy. But I wondered from your experience around the world with smart city projects, you know, do you see that Reading could benefit from some of these ideas, delivering green tech growth? You know, what could we be looking to achieve, and how important is collaboration between the private and public sector in achieving this?
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. And as you know, what I always say is smart cities are only smart if the people who live and work there think they're smart and they just work. The place works, it feels great. And the role of technology is important in creating those solutions that we may need. But the key point is smart cities are about communities. So technology is an enabler. So we need to understand what problems and challenges we have and see how we can embrace emerging technologies to help solve those problems. We did a piece of research, a global survey of 100 smart city leaders, and looked at those questions to see where they were investing and what they saw as important. And of course, smart cities, aside from the technology, are driven by the data and the analytics behind the data that's fed in by the various information systems, the sensors and the operational systems. And then that comes with it the need for good cybersecurity. But fundamentally, it's about connecting people across those communities and making better use of that knowledge and information. So as again, you create a better place, a cleaner place, a smarter place. So we've heard that, you know, sensors are out there that can deal with weather, mobility, health, temperature, rain, waste, energy, safety, travel. But all of that only works if there's a good governance structure in place. So where we need to learn is from those other global cities. For example, Barcelona, one of the leaders in that top 100, they have a smart city solution to how their place works and develops. So they have an online tool where communities can get involved in what happens, how places are reimagined, how they're created, what measures are put in place. Similarly, a system in Stockholm where they're driving emerging solutions around things like drone deliveries. That's something they've trialed. They've also got things like mobility as a service packages where it's a bit like the very good example in London of the control of the transport networks, where with one card you can travel on all of the public transport networks, and you know you'll get the best price if you travel through London. That's what Stockholm is doing, and other places like Helsinki with something called mobility as a service, where you buy a service package like a mobile phone package data, and that buys you travel. So you can just travel by bus, train, taxi, micro scooter, hire bike. So all the publicly available systems you can pay for and use. And those are examples of technology helping you do what you want to do as a person who lives or works in the place. Closer to home, we've got places like Milton Keynes running very advanced 5G trials. They've been running connected autonomous vehicles as shuttle systems. They also have a pilot of drone deliveries, which are small vehicles that run around the streets, fully automated, delivering packages. And part of it, one thing I haven't mentioned is part of all these stories is about resilience. So things like that enable you to be more resilient when we have to deal with a thing like COVID. So when people are isolated, when we can't get things out to them, they can't get out to the shops, we need to be able to get to them. Interestingly, one of the trials of Thames Valley Smart City Cluster was pre-COVID, was about tackling loneliness, enabling those people who are isolated to find new communities and get out more by giving them the technology to do that. So we've got some great examples just in Reading. And around Reading, investment in the transport systems, control mechanisms, linking traffic movement with noise and air quality to understand, okay, how can we improve air quality and people's health by changing the transport system? Yeah, so using sensors and monitors to link that all together. And we also have plans to include sensors on buses and trains, for example, to see whether seats are available. And all of this, hopefully, we're leading to what those 100 leaders said. They wanted increased passenger transport capacity, but more importantly, improved accessibility and passenger satisfaction, reliability and resilience, stable energy prices, which you've heard from the universities, some of the trials there, and the Climate Change Partnership. But most importantly, just to finish, it all only works if you've got cross-sector working together. So back to this point of governments, the likes of Reading UK, the university, businesses, and Reading Borough Council all working together to achieve this.
That's great, Scott. Thanks very much for just highlighting some of those great opportunities and the importance of partnership working. And I mean, for me, Reading has always punched above its weight economically, competing with major cities in the UK, but also across Europe. And there's no reason why that shouldn't continue. And I think also the ambition within Reading is there. If you look back just over the last 30 to 40 years, and people have been around that long, we'll just see how much Reading has changed and improved, and its economy has grown exponentially almost. So I think there's great opportunity and no reason why we can't learn from smart cities around the world, is there, and apply some of that learning to Reading as appropriate. So thanks for it.
I think, as you say, we are in a good position to do that. We've got the great university, we've got a supportive council, we've got Reading UK, and we've got business partners and communities wanting to make this work, and those are the key ingredients. So hopefully you've learned something from that discussion today, and it's been insightful. And we'd very much like you all to be involved in this as we go forwards to help support the growth of Reading, and both the Climate Change Challenge and our Reading 2050 vision. So I'd just like to thank all of our panelists this morning for contributing so well to the debate, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thank you. So you may all be interested to hear that immediately following this session, there's going to be a Twitter debate run by Reading University, Professor Tim Dixon and Lorraine Farrelly. If you want to get involved in that debate as part of the Reading Climate Change agenda, if you could use the hashtag Reading 2050, and you'll see lots of exciting debate and questions coming through that session.